Satan is not better at pleasure than God is.
Right.
That's a lie, right? And then you look at people like Nicholas Kardaras, who wrote the book Glow Kids, and he points out in there, he's treated hundreds of heroin addicts and screen addicts. And he says it is easier to treat a heroin addict than a true screen addict.
Wow.
So when we talk about addiction, this is not hyperbole. We're not just throwing a term out there. This is clinical reality. It's in the psychiatry Bible, they call it, the diagnostics. I mentioned that, the statistical manual where they diagnose these addictions. And you can tell, you take the 6-question survey, and like if I don't feel normal without it, and if I hide the extent of the problem, and you can figure out, okay, do I have a problem with this?
I mean, you just look at those videos of the little kids that get their iPad taken away from them, and it's like World War III meltdown.
Right, but what's the root? Like, what's the crux of the difference between the two? Because if you're drawn to media, right? So you get the same dopamine hit with using your phone, as in like being in nature and all of that. However, you're addicted, so to speak, with the media. You have that tantrum response, but not necessarily nature. It's the same natural hormones, but a different response. What's the crux of that?
Quantity and stimulant. It's being a stimulant like cocaine, like caffeine. The brain takes that in as a quick fix. It's the easy route versus you got to work at it, and then the payoff happens, and the frontal lobe is engaged. With Life God's Way, you're engaging frontal lobe activity, and then that brings activity to the pleasure reward circuit because you followed the correct route. When you target the pleasure hit, the nucleus accumbens gets hit with these stimulants, whether media or drugs, and no activity in the frontal lobe.
From a chemical perspective, what we do, and this is in many areas of life, is we increase, or we're subject to increases in concentration beyond their normal limits.
Yes.
So a good analogy, for example, is, are there natural sugars in fruits? Yeah. Yes. Is there salt naturally found occurring, sodium chloride and potassium chloride found naturally in potatoes? Yes.
But high doses.
What about, is there fats in avocados? Yes. And coconut, right? But once all of those are concentrated, and especially all three together, like the trifecta they call it, which is what McDonald's does, right? Increase the fat, increase the salt, increase the sugar. Now they're in disproportionate levels of what you're supposed to be getting, and your brain just goes nuts. It's like, oh my, I've got to have more of this, right? It's the same kind of thing that's going on with media. It's in disproportionate levels than you're normally supposed to experience.
The proof's in the pudding, though. If you sit and you look at the people that would binge watch something, right? How do you feel after you binge watch it? I mean, nobody's like, I feel amazing. You go run a 5K. Like, honestly, just compare the two together. You go outside, you go camping. You're going to feel totally different than sitting there watching TV.
Exactly.
I mean, you don't even need to like open a science book. Just like literally, like I feel better doing this than that.
That's so true. And going to the diet thing, the average American consumes, for every 1 calorie that we are eating from a whole plant food source, we are consuming 1 of those versus 25 of the everything else, the refined sugars, the refined fats, the refined foods. And that is making us less happy. It's the standard American diet, the SAD diet, SAD.
I love it.
It's not just killing us, but you become more depressed when you eat that way. When you eat servings of fruit and vegetables, you add that to your diet, there's a measurable boost of happiness for each serving of fruit and vegetables that you add to your diet. And they measured it up to 8 additional. So you crowd out that with something better, and you start feeling better. The average young person that I've surveyed, for every 1 hour that they are in God's word or in spiritual food of any kind, 25 hours of entertainment and media. So it's 25 to 1 ratio, the same as the standard American diet.
Wow.
Going to have the same effect on our happiness.